Lisa, why on earth would you want to kill your two
Court
children?
documents revealed Lisa Snyder told investigators her son had been bullied in school and wanted to die, but not alone.
In a world where parents are seen as protectors and guardians, some hide unimaginable darkness. Lisa Snyder's chilling crime and Andrea Yates' tragic struggle with postpartum illness reveal unthinkable betrayals. These haunting stories of parents turning against their children remind us that sometimes evil is closer than we think. Let's begin.
Subject of our investigation is the death of little Quinton Simon in Savannah, Georgia. The disappearance of this toddler from his home in 2022 sparked national attention.
Lisa Simon, a Georgia woman, was sentenced to life in prison after being convicted of killing her 20-month-old son, Quinton Simon, and hiding his body in a trash bin. The sentencing followed a month-long trial where Simon was found guilty of malice murder and 18 other charges. It was a quiet October morning in 2022 when the unthinkable happened. Simon, frantic and desperate, called 911, reporting that her young son had vanished from his playpen. The house was eerily still, with no sign of the child. Authorities arrived at the scene and the search began. Days turned into a blur of relentless searching, questioning, and sifting through every possible lead. Despite the efforts of Chatham County Police, led by the determined Chief Jeff Hadley, no trace of the child could be found. As the investigation continued, the mood shifted from one of hope to growing suspicion. The police began to believe that the child was no longer alive. The relentless search seemed to yield no answers, and all the clues pointed towards one unsettling truth. Simon, the mother, was now the prime suspect. The days that followed were filled with intense questioning and investigation, with investigators piecing together a web of details that painted an increasingly dark picture. What had started as a missing child case now seemed to be something far more sinister. Simon's life, once filled with the joy of motherhood, was now overshadowed by the devastating loss of her son and the looming suspicion that she might be responsible for it. For over a month, the investigation into Quinton's disappearance had led police and FBI agents to a local landfill. Days turned into weeks as they sifted through heaps of garbage, their hopes dwindling with each passing hour. But then, amid the refuse, they made a chilling discovery of human bones. The team rushed to confirm their findings, and DNA testing eventually revealed the remains belonged to Quinton. As the case unraveled, the focus shifted to Simon, Quinton's accused killer. During her trial, the cold, calculating nature of her actions became clear. Simon showed no remorse for her crime, a chilling indifference that shocked everyone in the courtroom. Evidence mounted that she had not only implicated innocent people in covering her tracks, but had also continued her life without hesitation, as if nothing had changed.
And does this document include all of them?
Yes, it does.
Before we get into, reading individual ones.
Her lack of empathy painted a clear picture of a person unburdened by guilt or conscience. Simon was convicted of murder, and the truth of her actions came to light, leaving a trail of heartbreak and disbelief in her wake. The investigation and subsequent trial left a permanent mark on everyone involved, a stark reminder of the darkness that can hide behind the most ordinary facades. Lisa Simon was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole, plus an additional 10 years for concealing her son's death. During the hearing, prosecutors emphasized her lack of accountability, and the lead detective shared new details, including Simon's actions during the search for her son's body. Simon did not testify, but expressed a desire for her son's remains to be returned to her family.
And now a jury and the public will hear the evidence that hopefully answers all those questions about what happened to little Quinton Simon.
Throughout the proceedings, Simon showed no remorse, which deeply affected the prosecution. But during her mom's interview, when her mom said, "I'm still unsure," when she heard these words, she started crying.
Well, the drugs has taken and had a huge impact on our entire lives. Even as Leilani's childhood, I failed her as a mom. I allowed addiction to take over my life at a young age.
She was described as being sorry only for getting caught, not for her actions. The emotional impact on Quinton's family was significant, with the judge's decision marking the tragic end of a case that highlighted the devastating loss of a young life. Lisa Simon's case is an unforgettable tragic tale of darkness. Next is the haunting betrayal of a mother's betrayal of trust.
A Berks County mother was found guilty of killing her two young children by hanging them in the basement of their home.
We're very pleased that Lisa Snyder will never see the light of day.
On a September day in 2019 in Albany Township, Pennsylvania, a chilling discovery shocked the community. Lisa Snyder, a mother of two, was accused of killing her children, 8-year-old Connor and 4-year-old Brinley. The siblings were discovered in a distressing situation in the basement of their home. What unfolded next was a heartbreaking tale of crime, mental health struggles, and justice. Lisa Snyder's story was deeply tragic, as she described how her 8-year-old son, Connor, had been struggling with bullying and feelings of despair. She shared that he had expressed thoughts of harming himself and his younger sister, painting a heartbreaking picture of a boy in emotional pain. However, as investigators continued their work, inconsistencies began to emerge in her account. Surveillance footage from Connor's school bus showed no signs of distress or mistreatment. Teachers and classmates corroborated this, describing Connor as a cheerful, kind child. The physical evidence also didn't align. Connor's small stature would have made it impossible for him to carry out the act Snyder described. Then came the chilling discoveries on Snyder's devices. Investigators uncovered a disturbing series of online searches related to self-harm and seeking information on harmful techniques and even how to kill someone. Snyder had also binge-watched episodes of I Almost Got Away With It, a crime series chronicling stories of people attempting to evade justice. These revelations unraveled the carefully constructed facade. What seemed like a tragedy born of bullying now pointed towards something far more sinister. In December 2019, Snyder was arrested, leaving the community to grapple with the horrifying reality that this was no accident, but a deliberate and calculated crime.
Lisa, why on earth would you want to kill your 2 children?
The courtroom was heavy with tension as Lisa Snyder's trial reached its conclusion in 2024. The defense painted a haunting picture of a troubled woman, overwhelmed by anxiety and depression. They argued that Snyder's mental health struggles could have driven her into a psychotic state during the tragic incident. A psychiatrist testified about her traumatic past, suggesting it might have clouded her judgment, though they emphasized there was no evidence she intended to harm her children.
Told us that it would be extremely difficult for Connor to operate the clasp on the dog leash or to manage to wrap the dog leash.
The prosecution, however, presented a chillingly different narrative. Their expert asserted that Snyder was fully capable of distinguishing right from wrong at the time of the crime. They highlighted damning evidence, her suspicious internet searches, and the calculated circumstances of her children's deaths. These details, they argued, pointed unequivocally to premeditation.
Lisa Snyder was convicted of first-degree murder, endangering the welfare of a child, and evidence tampering. 4-year-old Brinley and 8-year-old Connor.
As closing arguments concluded, the courtroom fell silent. The weight of the case hung over everyone present. All eyes turned to the judge as the verdict was read. Lisa Snyder was found guilty on 2 counts of first-degree murder, child endangerment, and evidence tampering. Gasps and whispers rippled through the room, marking the end of a trial that had dug into the darkest corners of human behavior and left no one untouched.
Taxpayer money to help pay for the defense of this Berks County woman charged with killing her 2 children. 37-year-old Lisa Snyder is considered indigent.
Berks County District Attorney John Adams expressed relief at the outcome, stating, "We are very pleased that Lisa Snyder will never see the light of day and will spend the rest of her life in jail where she belongs." Snyder is now facing a life sentence without the chance of parole. Her sentencing is scheduled for October. The case left a lasting impact on the community and those involved. The tragedy of Connor and Brinley's deaths was compounded by the betrayal of trust from their own mother. While justice has been served, the sorrow and loss felt by the children's loved ones will never truly fade. This story is a sobering reminder of the complexities of mental health and the devastating consequences of unaddressed struggles. Lisa's story is heartbreaking, but what about maternal love, twisted by the devastating grip of postpartum psychosis?
The idea of postpartum depression and psychosis come to play in the criminal justice system. It led Yates to drown her 5 children, one by one.
On June 20th, 2001, Andrea Yates, a Texas mother, committed a tragic act that shocked the nation. In a delusional state driven by postpartum psychosis, she drowned her 5 young children: Noah, 7, John, 5, Paul, 3, Luke, 2, and Mary, 6 months, in the bathtub of their family home in Clear Lake, a Houston suburb. Her husband, Rusty Yates, was at work when the horrific events unfolded. Andrea Yates was described as a loving and caring mother, but after the birth of her 4th child, she had long battled the dark grip of mental illness, and her struggles deepened into a harrowing descent. She faced significant challenges with postpartum depression and psychosis, which deeply impacted her mental health, leading to multiple attempts to take her life. Doctors urged her to stop having more children, warning of the risks. But Andrea and her husband, Rusty, welcomed a fifth baby, Mary, into their family.
Show no apparent hint of turmoil within the Yates home. Andrea Yates was described as a loving mother of 5 who homeschooled her children.
Rusty was cautioned against leaving Andrea alone with the children, but life's demands often found him trusting she would manage. On a fateful day, she was left unsupervised. In the throes of her delusions, Andrea became convinced she was a danger to her children's souls. Twisted by psychosis, she believed her influence would doom them to eternal suffering. In an unthinkable act of distorted love and desperation, she sought to save them. One by one, she took their lives. The tragedy shook the nation, igniting fierce debates about mental health, the burdens of caregiving, and the cracks in the justice system. Andrea's story was one of immense sorrow, raising haunting questions about how society protects its most vulnerable and what happens when it doesn't.
And in many states, including Texas, it's not just that you know.
Andrea was arrested and charged with capital murder. During her trial, her defense argued she was not guilty by reason of insanity, while the prosecution pushed for a life sentence. The case took a dramatic turn when a psychiatrist's false testimony led to her conviction being overturned on appeal. At her 2006 trial, Andrea was found not guilty by reason of insanity and was committed to a mental health facility.
She felt like she had this dilemma of, I love my children, and yet if I don't kill them.
Rusty Yates, deeply affected by the loss of his children, filed for divorce in 2005. He later remarried and had another child, but that marriage also ended in divorce. The trial became a harrowing spectacle, culminating in her conviction. But the story didn't end there. The case took a shocking twist when it was revealed that a psychiatrist's testimony, which had played a key role in her conviction, was false. This revelation overturned the verdict on appeal, giving Andrea another chance to tell her story. At her 2006 trial, a jury found her not guilty by reason of insanity. Instead of prison, she was sent to a mental health facility, a place where she could receive the care she so desperately needed. Meanwhile, Rusty Yates, Andrea's husband, struggled to rebuild his life after the devastating loss of their children. In 2005, he filed for divorce, a painful decision born from heartbreak. Years later, he remarried and welcomed another child, seeking solace in a new chapter. Yet, this second marriage also unraveled, leaving Rusty once again facing the challenges of rebuilding his life amidst lingering sorrow. Their intertwined stories remain a haunting tale of loss, love, and the enduring complexity of the human spirit.
But according to defense attorney George Parnham, Yates is upset.
Very upset, very upset.
Rusty Yates dropped his head in his hands and cried at the verdict.
The tragedy left an indelible mark on everyone involved. Rusty Yates expressed grief, forgiveness, and a longing for understanding. Andrea was a wonderful mother, he said, reflecting on how her mental state drastically altered her behavior. Andrea, meanwhile, remains burdened by guilt, reportedly believing her actions were necessary to save her children from damnation.
And that's, people find that just outrageous, I know, but I don't. I don't blame her one bit.
But the verdict was later overturned, and in a subsequent trial, she was found not guilty by reason of insanity. She testified she believed her children's deaths would save their souls.
The case continues to evoke strong emotions and raises critical questions about mental health, parental responsibilities, and the justice system's role in handling such tragedies. Andrea Yates' case describes how tragic mental illness can be. But what happens when a father's story unravels into the chilling case of the disappearance of his young daughter?
Father DeAndre Lane says despite what people may think, he is innocent.
I had nothing to do with my daughter's disappearance. I would never harm my children. My children are my life.
On December 2nd, 2011, DeAndre Lane reported a shocking crime. His 2-year-old daughter, Bianca Jones, had been kidnapped during a carjacking in Detroit. The incident sparked a citywide search and widespread concern. Lane claimed that after leaving Bianca in his car while dropping off his nephew at school, carjackers took the vehicle with Bianca inside. Hours later, the car was recovered, but Bianca was nowhere to be found. Lane's story raised more questions than answers, leaving investigators skeptical. He claimed to be the victim of a carjacking or taken by house owner Patrice, but the pieces of his timeline didn't seem to fit. Bianca, his young daughter, had vanished, and police were unconvinced by his account. He says, "I tried to see if I recognized her, but I didn't. I just saw people coming in and out of my house. I never saw my daughter." They believed a far darker truth lay hidden behind his words.
Tried to see if I could recognize her, but I didn't. I just saw people coming in and out of a house. I never saw my daughter.
According to authorities, Bianca wasn't taken by a stranger. They suspected she had been killed the night before, during a tragic and terrifying punishment for wetting the bed. The carjacking story, they argued, was a desperate fabrication to mask her death. As they dug deeper, an unsettling detail emerged: a 17-minute gap in Lane's cell phone records. Investigators were certain this was no coincidence. To them, it was the crucial window during which he had disposed of Bianca's body, erasing the evidence of what they believed to be his crime. Lane maintained his innocence, insisting he was a victim, not a perpetrator. But the mounting evidence painted a grim picture. Police and prosecutors were convinced that Lane's story wasn't about a stolen car or a missing child. It was a tale of guilt and concealment, and they were determined to uncover the truth. The trial of Lane captivated everyone, blending emotional testimonies with chilling forensic evidence. Cadaver dogs flown in from Europe uncovered traces of human remains in haunting locations: Bianca's bed and Lane's car. Yet, despite these grim discoveries, Bianca's body was never found, and no witnesses could confirm her death.
Lane is accused of losing his temper with Bianca and beating her with a stick because she pottied on herself.
He was crying or hysterical or whatever for a long time, just and I couldn't get nothing out of him.
Lane, defiant and emotional, stood by his innocence, calling the evidence circumstantial and the accusations unfounded. His defense pointed to gaps in the case, suggesting that assumptions rather than facts painted him as the villain. The plot thickens when reports surface of Bianca being seen alive after her disappearance. A police officer claimed to have spotted her 8 days later during an unrelated call. Months later, a private investigator swore he saw her.
Said anything about me or my child. They came from that table like this. Nobody in that seat said that. You have testimony.
Disguised as a boy, walking in the shadows of anonymity, these accounts cast doubt, weaving intrigue into an already enigmatic case. Despite the unanswered questions and contradictory sightings, the jury delivered its verdict. Lane's face fell, a mixture of disbelief and despair as the gavel struck. Despite all of his accounts, the jury found Lane guilty of Bianca's murder.
Could have changed the outcome of DeAndre's trial.
We had no idea at the time that these two were related or had any kind of connection.
Lane was sentenced to life in prison without parole. He continues to insist on his innocence, pleading with the public to keep searching for his daughter. Bianca's mother, Bianca Jones, also believes her daughter is alive and has called for renewed efforts to locate her. The case leaves a heavy cloud of uncertainty and heartbreak. Lane's words, "No one has evidence that my daughter is dead," resonate deeply with those who doubt the conviction. For others, the lack of closure is haunting. Bianca's mother's hope and Lane's life sentence stand as reminders of a tragedy that continues to raise more questions than answers.
There wasn't a lot to work with. In my mind, I was concerned that despite the evidence, there's no body.
The actions of these parents remind us how easily trust can be broken and how betrayal can destroy families. Their reactions in court show the harm they cause to innocent lives. But this is just the start. The next video on your screen dives deeper into more shocking cases and jaw-dropping sentences that stunned the world. Keep watching.